Whenever I see comments saying I see 9 wins on this schedule or Matt Rhule sucked with the Panthers, so he's definitely going to fail in Lincoln, I start to wonder where those people get their ideas from. I guess with the Rhule haters or the pessimist Nebraska fans, it's easy to trace where their doubts come from. But what about the believers? Not the 9 win guys, but the reasonable believers. The ones like me who expect 500 or better. Now, I get why there's excitement and hope for more, but if you're in first grade, you've never seen a Nebraska team win at least half their games. And if you've done any research on the new coach, you know about his first year track record. So why? Why is there hope? What's fair to expect? And what had to be corrected this offseason to make our dreams come true? Well, I've got answers to all these questions. So today we'll talk about the main issues that Matt Rhule has to correct to win in year one. And I'll give you a few expectations I have for the 2023 season. But what's up, guys? I'm Connor Hayden, and this is Corn Crazed. If you're a fan of Nebraska or the Big Ten, hit the subscribe button below so you don't miss any of my live interviews coming up. And if you want my depth chart predictions this month, hit the like button now to help us get to 1,000. But now, let's get into it.
Thompson lines up, goes deep, got a man, touchdown!
That first question I got to answer is so interesting to me because honestly, why is there hope? Nebraska's coming off its worst season in 60 years. They lost their number one quarterback, number one receiver, number one pass rusher, and some depth on both sides of the line. Sure, the transfer class seems solid, but so did the one they brought in last year. Matt Rhule's year one history says he's good for 1 or maybe 2 wins, but the general feeling from the fan base is that this team should win at least 6 games. Now, I'm not here to bring you down. I've got multiple reasons for optimism, so let's run through them. In terms of recruiting rankings, this is the strongest roster that Rhule or either of his 2 coordinators has gotten to work with. They get a more favorable schedule, at least in the preseason, than they ever did before. In his first year at Baylor, Rhule faced 4 top 25 teams, and as of today, only Michigan and Wisconsin are ranked in the majority of the preseason polls. There's plenty of top-level experience returning with 14 total starters from 2022 and 4 new starters added from the transfer portal. There's a ton of positive momentum with 3 Big Ten wins and 3 one-score competitive losses in the last 8 games. You're either all aboard the Matt Rhule train to the postseason or you're still a little emotionally scarred from the ultimate letdown and mess we had to go through just 9 months ago. Or you're on the sideline refusing to make any predictions or expect anything more than 3 wins since you're tired of the same shit happening over and over and over again. But no matter what side you're on, today we're looking at this revamped team objectively, and we're only looking back to the prior performances we saw under the last staff to help us understand what needs to be changed for the 2023 team to finish with a better outcome. We'll talk about the 5 biggest, or at least my 5 biggest issues that need to be corrected to improve on last year, and then we'll set some expectations for this first year based on everything we know so far. And the expectations we're setting are based solely on who's a part of the program today and not the people who caused us heartbreak for way too long. And this list of issues to correct isn't in any particular order, but we're going to start off with the one we saw in the spring game, and that's the turnovers. One of the biggest talking points after the spring game was how many fumbles we saw from different guys on offense. And although I don't think the spring game's a good indicator for how good a team's going to look in the fall, turnovers cost them multiple games these past couple years with 18 total in 2021 and 19 in 2022. In Ireland against Northwestern, up 4, driving for a score, fumble. Then in the fourth quarter again, up 4 at midfield, interception. And the end result? A loss. In the last home game against a top 10 Michigan team, with the game tied in the final minute, the quarterback fumbled. And the end result? Another loss. I got tons of examples, and most of the turnovers weren't because the players have small hands or they aren't strong enough to hold the ball or whatever other excuse we could come up with for why they gave the ball up. These were, for the most part, mental mistakes or the result of the center whiffing snaps or the line missing blocks and putting ball carriers and passers in really tough positions. The reasons don't matter though, because they just need to see some improvement or a solution since it's been one of the biggest reasons why there have been so many losses. And sticking with a similar topic, the next point to correct is how to finish games. You want painful stats? In 2022, Nebraska lost 8 games. 5 of those 8 losses were by 7 points or less. 4 of those 5 came after going into the fourth quarter tied or with a lead. Outside of building player confidence and getting the team mentally prepared to battle for the last 15 minutes, I think a lot of closing out games falls on the coaches. The kickers deal with insane pressure when it all comes down to one field goal, and the quarterback has to calm his nerves and not let the moment get to his head. But when you've got NFL potential on the roster, you hope they can execute no matter what the situation is. Clock management and strategic play calling seem to be an issue these past few years, and even though the offense and the defense didn't execute how the coaches were hoping, the play calling and situations the team found themselves in, what felt like every week, was sloppy and really frustrating for us to watch. Rhule knows how bad Frost was in the fourth quarter, and he's talked about what it takes to win close games in the Big Ten. So, my guess is we're going to see more encouraging end games than we're used to. I won't spend too much time on this point since we've talked about it so many times, but player development's been a huge problem. There were a few guys that made big impacts and got the NFL, like Cam Jurgens and Cam Taylor Britt, but the general result hasn't been as pretty. Both Turner Corcoran and Bryce Benhart were highly recruited coming out of high school, but neither of them performed at the level you'd expect for guys rated that high. Matt Rhule made comments about his belief in the line's potential and that Benhart could make it in the pros. And if he's being honest and can turn any of these guys who struggled during the Frost era into all Big Ten caliber players, I'll be really curious to see what he can do with his own recruits. First, it was Troy Walters, then it was Matt Lubick, and last year it was Mark Whipple. And for whatever reason, Frost never got on the same page as any of them. And the offensive play calling never looked as good as it did in Oregon or at UCF. Just like in 2018, Rhule's bringing his whole crew over to help with the rebuild, but the difference is on defense. Tony White never coached at Temple, Baylor, or Carolina, so we won't know for sure if this coaching marriage will work until we see it play out on Saturdays. I remember Bill Bush and Mickey Joseph both implying they didn't agree with the way Shenander ran the defense, and Whipple didn't do Applewhite or Raiola any favors by neglecting the run game and doing things his way. But this new staff seems to have a lot of respect for each other and believes in their head coach's overall vision for each unit and each side of the ball as a whole. And if that means the team's going to look more cohesive, it should also mean they're going to win more games. And last is boosting the pass rush. There's a direct correlation to a good Nebraska defense with one and a bad one without it. Colorado, Louisiana Tech, Maryland, and Wisconsin are all going to air it out this year. And Minnesota, Michigan, and Purdue all have QBs that can move around the pocket and create big play moments if the defense lets them. Tony White has the DBs to lock receivers down on their first route, but if there's no pressure in the backfield and these dual threat QBs have 10 seconds to wait for somebody to get open, the line will be the unit taking the most heat. Matt Rhule's original position group was the D line, so I'd expect to see some improvement there. And with the 3-3-5 notorious for creating chaos and confusing quarterbacks, I'm expecting some more pressure and tougher situations for offenses to deal with. Now that we got some of the main issues to correct laid out, let's define some realistic expectations that fans should have for this staff in year one. First, they should have at least 5 players make first, second, or third team All Big Ten. Last year, when they finished 4-8 and lost their head coach and DC, Garrett Nelson and Trey Palmer both finished second and third team, and Anthony Grant, Luke Reimer, and Quentin Newsome were named honorable mention. For reference, Wisconsin went 6-6 and finished with 4 All Big Ten players and 2 more on the honorable mention list. The coaches already built great relationships in their position groups, and they're giving anybody a shot to win the job based on how good they look in practice instead of how well they did in the last couple seasons. The most talented guys are having to work harder because there's more competition, and my guess is that'll draw out better play from multi-year starters who can't stay stagnant if they want to keep their jobs. Some names to watch here are Quentin Newsome, Malcolm Hartzog, Luke Reimer, MJ Sherman, Ben Scott, and whichever running back gets the most carries. And I don't include Jeff Sims since McCarthy and Tagovailoa both return, and I'm guessing they'll lock up the top 2 spots, leaving only one spot open for a QB. And I didn't include a receiver because Trey Palmer made the 3rd team, but he had to break the single season receiving yards record just to get there. Number 2, no losses by more than 17 points. And the only reason I'm saying that many is because they've got to play a really strong Michigan team who beat them last year by 31. And there were actually 3 losses by more than 17 last season, but they replaced Oklahoma with Colorado. Michigan's going to be at home, and Illinois probably won't injure the quarterback back-to-back years. We know there's going to be a focus on the run game, so that'll help to drain clock and give opposing offenses less chances to get on the board. And in theory, it should reduce the risk of turnovers that swing momentum and kill any positive energy the offense was trying to build on. Competitive teams are more likely to fight through the entire schedule, and a loss by 7's a lot more encouraging than a loss by 21. And players feel when they're close, and they know when the team they're playing on just isn't very good. And if the morale dips too low, players will quit giving 100% or they'll just give up on the entire season. The good news for Rhule is this team showed they're willing to fight. They lost by 31 and bounced back to almost beat Wisconsin. They end up losing that game by 1, but they still came out on fire against Iowa to finish the season on a high note. We know the team won't quit, so the staff just has to make sure they're locked in with solid game plans. And that brings us to number 3, which is common sense play calling. And common sense doesn't mean you can't take risks. It just means you make the best decision depending on the circumstances. A great example of a bad call was against Michigan in 2021. It was 4th and 2 from the 3-yard line, and Nebraska's best and most reliable guy on offense was Adrian Martinez, so Frost called a QB sweep to the right pylon. The problem was his 2 lead blockers were Ramir Johnson, who had to take on a DB 30 pounds heavier than him, and Chancellor Brewington, who had to crack down on a 280-pound DN that ended up getting drafted. The size mismatch was obvious, and you can't blame either of the 2 lead blockers for being put in a bad position. The coaches should have seen what was coming. Another obvious example is kicking it onside against Northwestern with the lead. Make it make sense. Rhule's talked about the ways you win in the Big Ten, and clock management, protecting the ball, and playing the game that works is at the top of his list. They're going to be better in this area, but we're still going to have to wait and see if the bodies up front can support their vision. And my last expectation is to finish with a top 20 recruiting class. So far, the class is looking really good. There were questions about the offensive line, but a couple days ago, they landed the number 1 player in Hawaii who ranks in the top 15 nationally for interior linemen. And my crystal ball says Grant Brix is next, who happens to be the number 1 player in Iowa and the number 2 interior lineman in the nation. It'll be tough to add more guys to the class since they're already sitting at 24 commitments. But if Rhule can win in year 1, the excitement and hype turn into belief, and the belief will attract bigger names. And 4-star guys who might have been considering Nebraska but wanted to see proof first might now actually take him seriously. Coaching changes happen every year, and classes are going to get shuffled up, so expecting this class to finish top 20 isn't crazy, especially if this team exceeds expectations and finds a way to win 8 games. I know this is just an overview, but I'm working on my full season prediction to tell you how I see things playing out, and I should have that ready in about 2 weeks. My next video will be about the top 7 position battles to watch, and then next Wednesday, after media days, I'm planning to go live and have a special interview. So make sure you don't miss that, because that'll be the first live stream back to get us ready for this season. But I want to know what you think, so let me know in the comments below. Which of these issues is the most important to correct for a successful season? Are you more concerned about the pass rush, or is limiting turnovers a bigger priority? Is it fair to expect closer games, or blowouts just a part of playing in the Big Ten West? And last, let me know an expectation you have for this year, because I know I left some off the board. And don't tell me a win expectation, because we'll have plenty of time to talk about how many games they win once we make it to August. But that's all I've got for today. So until next time, thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next one. Go Big Red.